She was dying of thirst, until the Apache widow's milk brought her back to life. Emma wiped the sweat from her brow, but it did little to cool her face or ease the dryness in her throat. She had been walking for hours, each step heavier than the last. Her water bottle, which had been her constant companion since the morning, was now almost empty, leaving her with only the faint hope that she would find something, anything, to drink before it was too late. The desert stretched around her in every direction, silent and unchanging, except for the occasional gust of hot wind that stirred the sand into tiny swirling storms. Emma's journey had begun with excitement. She had wanted to see the desert, to experience its wild beauty and its quiet majesty. Maps, supplies, and careful planning had given her confidence. But as the hours passed, the desert revealed its true nature, a harsh, relentless place that did not forgive mistakes or weakness. Her boots, though sturdy, sank into the soft sand with every step, and the sun seemed to move faster across the sky than it should. At first, she had walked with purpose, taking deliberate steps toward the distant ridge she had seen from the last hill. But now exhaustion had begun to cloud her mind. Each movement felt like lifting 100 pounds. Her lips were cracked and dry, and even her thoughts were becoming sluggish, like her mind was wading through thick, heavy water. She stopped for a moment and sank to the ground, pressing her hands into the warm sand, trying to feel some connection to the earth beneath her feet. The heat pressed down from above, and for the first time, fear crept into her heart. She tried to focus on the horizon, searching for some sign of life, a tree, a rock formation, anything that might give her shade or water. But all she saw was the endless golden expanse, glimmering in the sunlight. The beauty of it, which had seemed so alluring when she first arrived, now felt like a trap, a vast desert that threatened to swallow her whole. She whispered her own name, almost like a prayer, and hoped that someone, anyone, would hear her. Emma thought of her family back home, her younger brother who always counted on her to bring back stories of her travels. She thought of her parents, who had always encouraged her curiosity but worried about her daring spirit. She had wanted to tell them that she could handle anything, that she was strong and capable. But now, as her body weakened and her throat burned with thirst, she realized how vulnerable she truly was. The desert did not care for bravery or determination. It only respected those who respected it in return. She tried to take another step, but her legs refused to cooperate. The muscles ached, and the heat made them feel like they were filled with lead. Sweat soaked her clothes, clinging uncomfortably to her skin, and the sun seemed to pierce through every layer, burning not just her body but her very spirit. She sank to the sand again, feeling the grains stick to her damp skin. For a moment she allowed herself to simply lie there, letting the heat wash over her, feeling utterly powerless. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time had lost all meaning in the desert's embrace. Emma's thoughts began to drift in a strange haze. She remembered moments from her childhood, memories that seemed both distant and vivid. She remembered the smell of rain on a spring morning, the laughter of friends by the river, the warmth of her mother's hand on hers. Those memories, so simple and ordinary, now felt like treasures she could never reclaim. They reminded her of a life that seemed impossibly far away, and the thought of leaving it behind filled her with both sadness and fear. Despite the overwhelming exhaustion, something inside her refused to give in. She knew she could not stay where she was. To survive, she needed to move, to find water, to find shade, to find life. Summoning what little strength remained, she pushed herself upright. Her vision blurred, and the world wobbled like it might tip over at any moment, but she forced her legs to carry her forward. Each step was agony, each breath a struggle, but she clung to the hope that she might stumble upon a miracle, some sign that she was not entirely alone in this vast, unforgiving place. The desert, however, remained silent. The wind continued to whisper past her, carrying tiny grains of sand that stung her arms and face. She searched for landmarks, trying to remember the map she had studied so carefully before her journey. But the desert seemed to shift and change with every gust of wind. Every dune looked the same, and every shadow seemed to move just out of reach. Panic began to rise inside her, making her heart pound and her head spin. Emma's mind began to play tricks on her. She imagined seeing water glistening in the distance, only to find it was a mirage, a cruel trick of the desert. She imagined someone walking toward her, a friendly face, a helping hand, only to see empty sand and endless sky. Her heart ached not just from thirst, but from the realization that she might truly be alone. And yet, even in the depths of fear, a spark of determination remained. She refused to give up without trying, refused to surrender to the desert without a fight. As the sun began to lower slightly in the sky, the heat seemed to soften just a little, offering a tiny reprieve. Emma spotted a small rise in the distance, a hill that could offer a better view of the land around her. She decided to make for it, pushing herself with a strength she did not know she possessed. Her legs trembled, her throat screamed for water, and her vision swam with heat and exhaustion, but she kept moving, step by agonizing step. Reaching the top of the hill, she paused to catch her breath. From this vantage point, the desert stretched endlessly, a sea of gold and orange under the fading sun. But amid the harshness, there was beauty, delicate patterns in the sand, shadows dancing across the dunes, and the quiet stillness that spoke of both danger and wonder. Emma allowed herself a moment to simply take it in, to breathe in the dry air and feel the wind against her face. It was a moment of clarity, a reminder that life, even in the harshest conditions, could still be beautiful. But the relief was fleeting. Her water bottle was empty. Her strength was nearly gone. Her skin felt tight and raw, and each heartbeat seemed louder than the last. She sank to the sand once more, tears of exhaustion and frustration pricking her eyes. She whispered again, calling out softly for help, for something, for anything that might save her. The desert remained silent, indifferent to her suffering. And then, just as despair began to take hold, a faint movement caught her eye. A figure in the distance, small and almost blending into the golden sand. Emma blinked, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her again. But the figure moved steadily and deliberately, and she felt a strange flicker of hope ignite in her chest. Could it be a traveler? A guide, someone who could offer her life-saving water and shelter? She did not know, but for the first time in hours she felt a surge of determination. She would reach that figure, no matter what it took. With the last reserves of her strength, Emma pushed herself to her feet. Her legs shook violently, but she forced one step after another, leaning on sheer willpower. The desert had tested her, pushed her to the brink, and yet she refused to surrender. Whatever lay ahead, she was determined to face it, to survive, and to continue her journey. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, and Emma moved forward, driven by hope, fear, and the unyielding human instinct to survive. The heat of the desert had begun to take a heavy toll on Emma. Her legs felt like lead, her arms ached, and every breath seemed like a battle against the relentless sun. Sweat poured down her face and back, but it did nothing to cool her body. Her throat burned, parched beyond endurance, and every sip of the last few drops of water she had earlier felt like a treasure lost too soon. She tried to focus, to push herself forward, but the world around her seemed to shift and shimmer in waves of heat. The sand beneath her boots was no longer solid, but soft and treacherous, threatening to swallow each step as though the desert itself were determined to stop her. Emma stumbled, catching herself with her hands pressed against the hot sand. She sank to her knees, breathing heavily, her mind spinning. For a moment she considered giving up, letting the desert take her. But even in her weakest moment, something inside her rebelled. She had come too far, worked too hard, and dreamed too much to give in now. Still, her body was protesting in ways she had never imagined. Her vision blurred with heat exhaustion, and tiny stars seemed to dance behind her closed eyelids. Time lost all meaning. The sun moved lazily across the sky, casting sharp shadows across the dunes. Emma's mind wandered, caught between reality and delirium. She remembered her childhood, her family, her friends, and the world she had left behind. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of comfort and warmth, of water and shade that seemed impossible to find in this vast emptiness. She remembered her mother's gentle voice, encouraging her to keep going, to never give up, even when the path seemed impossible. She whispered those words now, as if speaking them aloud could somehow summon strength into her weary body. Her steps became slower and more uneven. The weight of the sun and sand pressed down on her, and each movement seemed like wading through invisible quicksand. Her stomach tightened painfully, a sharp reminder that her body was running out of fuel. She tried to think logically, calculate distances, find the nearest hill or rock formation, look for signs of life, but the heat made every calculation difficult. Her thoughts slipped and twisted, turning ordinary logic into confusion. She started imagining small patches of water glimmering in the distance, only to find them vanish as soon as she approached. Each mirage mocked her desperation, making her heart sink further. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion had nearly overcome her completely. Emma sank into the sand, leaning back against a small dune. Her body trembled from the combination of heat, thirst, and fatigue. She closed her eyes, willing herself to rest, even knowing that resting too long might mean she would never rise again. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, matching the pounding in her temples. She felt faint, her senses dulling one by one. The warmth of the sand burned through her clothes, her skin sticky with sweat. She whispered prayers and pleas, asking for guidance, for help, for something, anything, to pull her back from the edge. As the hours dragged on, the desert remained indifferent. The wind carried grains of sand that stung her skin, and the sun continued its relentless journey across the sky. Emma's lips had cracked and bled slightly, her tongue dry and swollen. She tried to take a small sip from her almost empty bottle of water, but it was gone. Panic began to rise again, a sharp, piercing fear that made her chest tighten and her vision blur. She knew that she could not survive much longer without water. Every instinct screamed at her to find something, someone, anything that could save her. Her body began to falter. Her legs buckled under her weight and she fell forward, pressing her hands into the sand for support. Her thoughts scattered. She thought about what it might feel like to fade into unconsciousness, to let the desert claim her. Fear and despair mingled with determination in a confusing, overwhelming swirl. And yet, even in this near-hopeless state, she forced herself to rise again. Her hands dug into the sand, her feet moved forward step by step, and she pushed through the pain. Hours passed like days. Every step was agony, but Emma refused to stop. She focused on small, achievable goals. Reach the next dune, reach the small rock ahead, move toward the faint shadow in the distance. She whispered encouragement to herself, repeating over and over that she could make it. Her mind clung to hope like a lifeline, even as her body begged for surrender. As the afternoon waned, a sense of delirium began to set in. Emma's thoughts became hazy and disjointed. She began to see shapes in the sand, shadows that seemed to move toward her. Sometimes she imagined voices calling her name, soft and distant, only to realize it was the wind carrying echoes across the dunes. She stumbled repeatedly, her feet sinking into the soft sand, and each time it felt more difficult to lift herself again. Her body was weak, her muscles cramping, her vision clouded by dehydration and fatigue. She collapsed again, unable to rise. Her chest heaved, her lungs burning with each breath. She tried to lie flat against the sand, hoping to conserve energy, but the heat pressed down like a weight she could not lift. Her mind wandered to her past adventures, the trips she had taken, the places she had dreamed of visiting. All those memories, once vibrant and joyful, now felt distant and fragile. She whispered apologies to her family, thinking she might never see them again, tears stinging her dry, cracked eyes. But then, through the haze of exhaustion and fear, she remembered the figure she had seen on the hill earlier. It had seemed so small and distant, almost like a dream, but it had been real. She clung to the memory, repeating it over and over as a mantra. That distant figure was hope, perhaps even salvation. It was something tangible, something she could focus on, something that reminded her that she was not entirely alone. With an effort that seemed almost impossible, she forced herself upright once more. Her legs trembled violently, her knees buckled and her arms shook, but she took one step, then another. Her movements were slow, labored, almost mechanical, but she kept going. Each step was a battle, each breath a struggle, but she clung to life with a fierce determination. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma forced herself to look ahead. There, on the horizon, she could see a faint figure moving steadily. It was not an illusion this time. It was real. Her heart leaped with hope, and a new surge of energy filled her exhausted body. She began to walk faster, ignoring the pain in her legs, ignoring the dryness that clawed at her throat. Each step brought her closer, and with it, the possibility of survival. The figure grew clearer as she approached, a woman, moving with calm and deliberate steps, carrying something in her hands. Emma's throat tightened with relief, and tears of exhaustion and gratitude blurred her vision. She stumbled forward, calling out softly, her voice hoarse and barely audible. The woman stopped, turned, and met her gaze. In that moment, Emma felt a flicker of hope, a lifeline she had almost lost, and a promise that perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive the desert after all. Emma collapsed to her knees again, but this time it was different. This time it was not surrender, but anticipation. She had found someone who could help her. The fear that had gripped her for hours began to ease, replaced by a fragile hope that her story was not yet over. And as the figure approached steadily, Emma realized that she might finally be saved, that the desert, for all its harshness, had led her to help, and that life, even at its most difficult, could find a way. Emma's legs trembled as she struggled forward, the sand beneath her boots soft and unyielding. Her body felt as though it belonged to someone else, a fragile shell moving through the burning desert. Each step was agony, each breath a sharp stab of dryness in her throat. But in the distance, she could see her hope taking shape, the figure that had appeared on the horizon, moving slowly and deliberately toward her. As she squinted against the sun, she noticed that the figure was a woman, tall and calm, her movements steady despite the harsh heat. She carried a small container, and the sun caught it, making it gleam in the golden light. Emma's heart surged. Could it be that this woman was here to help her? Could she be the answer to the desperate prayers whispered into the hot desert wind? She stumbled forward, calling out in a weak, raspy voice, "Please help." The woman stopped immediately and looked directly at her. Her eyes were calm, steady, and compassionate. There was no fear, no hesitation, only recognition of someone in need. She approached slowly, cautiously, but with a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate reassurance. Emma felt an unfamiliar but welcome wave of relief wash over her. She sank to her knees, unable to go any further but desperate to reach out, to make some connection with this stranger who had appeared like a miracle. "Are you all right, child?" the woman asked in a voice that was soft yet strong. She had a quiet authority, the kind that comes from years of living in a harsh land and knowing its every secret. Her tone was gentle, not condescending, and Emma felt herself relax slightly, though she was still too weak to speak properly. "My water, please," Emma managed to croak, her throat so dry that even the smallest words were difficult to form. The woman nodded, understanding immediately. She knelt beside Emma, setting the small container of milk on the sand between them. Emma's eyes widened. Milk. In this desert, It seemed impossible, yet here it was, life itself in a simple, humble container. The woman extended her hand, offering the milk to Emma. Emma hesitated for a moment, her mind clouded by exhaustion and distrust. She had been alone in the desert for hours, battling thirst, heat, and fear. Trust was difficult to summon when survival had been her only focus for so long. But the desperation in her body, the screaming need to drink, overpowered her hesitation. She reached out and took the container, lifting it shakily to her lips. The milk was warm but smooth, and as it touched her dry throat, Emma felt a miraculous relief. Strength began to return, not all at once but slowly, like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. She drank cautiously at first, savoring each drop, and then more eagerly, as if each mouthful were a gift she had been waiting for her entire life. The woman watched quietly, patient, letting Emma drink until her body had absorbed enough to calm the desperate thirst that had threatened to consume her. Emma's hands shook as she held the container. She wanted to speak to thank the woman, but words were too heavy and her voice too weak. Instead, she simply nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. The woman smiled faintly, a soft, knowing smile that spoke of experience and understanding. She had seen the desperation in the eyes of many who had wandered too far, and she knew how dangerous the desert could be. But she also knew how life could be saved with a simple act of kindness. "My name is Ayana," the woman said finally, her voice steady and warm. "You need to rest. You are very close to losing yourself out here." Emma tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, her lips trembling. Instead, she nodded weakly, leaning against a small dune as Ayana adjusted her sitting position beside her. As Emma rested, she took in the woman beside her. Ayana's skin was tanned from years under the desert sun, her hands strong and calloused, evidence of a life spent working with her goats and living in harmony with the harsh environment. Her eyes were sharp, alert, yet filled with a gentle wisdom that seemed to understand everything without needing words. Emma felt a mixture of awe and gratitude, realizing that she had stumbled upon someone who was not only a savior but also a teacher, someone who could guide her through the dangers of the desert. Minutes passed, and Emma's strength gradually returned. Her body no longer felt like a weight dragging her down, and her mind, though still foggy, began to regain clarity. She looked at Ayana and finally managed to whisper, "Thank you. I thought I wouldn't make it." Ayana nodded, her expression calm and steady. "You almost didn't," she said simply. "The desert is merciless, but you are still here, and that is what matters." She paused, looking at the horizon where the sun continued its slow descent. "You need to understand this place if you are to survive it. It gives life, but it takes just as easily." Emma listened intently, realizing that she had more to learn than she could have imagined. Her journey had been one of determination and courage, but also one of ignorance. The desert had tested her in ways she had not anticipated, and without Ayana, she might not have survived. She felt a deep sense of humility and gratitude, understanding that sometimes survival depended not just on willpower, but on the kindness of those who knew the land better than anyone else. Ayana began to share simple lessons, her voice calm and instructional. She spoke of how to find water in unlikely places, how to recognize the signs of life in the desert, and how to protect oneself from the relentless sun. She explained the importance of conserving energy, resting during the hottest parts of the day, and moving carefully to avoid exhaustion. Emma absorbed every word, realizing that each lesson could mean the difference between life and death. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the dunes, Emma felt a renewed sense of hope. She was no longer alone, no longer at the mercy of the desert without guidance. The milk had given her life back, and Ayana's presence had given her the knowledge and support she needed to survive. She realized that this encounter was more than chance. It was a turning point, a moment where fate and human kindness intersected in a life-changing way. Emma and Ayanna stayed together as the sun continued to set, the desert transforming into a landscape of warm, soft colors. The danger had not completely passed, but with each passing moment, Emma felt her strength returning. She could now think clearly, move more steadily, and even smile faintly, though exhaustion still lingered. Ayanna remained by her side, offering guidance and silent encouragement, a quiet guardian in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. That evening, as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Emma realized how close she had come to death. She thought of the hours she had spent collapsing in the sand, gasping for water, and battling the overwhelming fear of fading away alone. But she also thought of the milk, warm and nourishing, and of the calm, steady presence of Ayanna, who had given her not just life, but also hope. Gratitude filled her heart in a way that words could not fully express. Ayanna helped Emma find a small shaded area between two dunes, a place protected from the wind and the chill that would come once the sun disappeared. She instructed Emma to rest and conserve her energy, explaining that the desert nights could be harsh and unforgiving, just as the days were merciless. Emma followed the instructions carefully, feeling the warmth of safety and the relief of knowing that she was not alone. As Emma drifted into a light, exhausted sleep, she thought about the incredible turn her journey had taken. Hours ago, she had been on the brink of collapse, her body screaming for water, her mind clouded with fear. Now she was alive, nourished, and in the care of someone who understood the desert and respected its power. The desert had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and brought her face to face with the harshest realities of survival. But it had also introduced her to Ayanna, whose kindness and knowledge had saved her life. Emma's dreams that night were filled with images of sand dunes, the warmth of the sun, and the comforting presence of Ayanna. She dreamt of water, of gentle streams and hidden oases, and of the strange beauty of a land that could be both deadly and breathtaking. Even in sleep, she felt the lessons of the desert beginning to take root within her, shaping her understanding of survival, courage, and the power of human kindness. By the time she awoke the next morning, Emma felt stronger. The milk had replenished her body, and the rest had allowed her mind to clear. She looked at Ayanna with gratitude and newfound respect. The woman had given her life when she had been on the brink of death, and she had done so without hesitation or expectation. Emma realized that this encounter would stay with her forever, a story of survival, hope, and the quiet power of human generosity. The first rays of morning sunlight spilled across the desert, turning the sand into a sea of soft gold and orange. Emma woke slowly, stretching her stiff muscles and blinking against the bright light. For the first time in what felt like days, she noticed how quiet the desert could be. It was not just the absence of sound, but a calm, steady presence that seemed to surround her and offer reassurance. She turned her head slightly and saw Ayanna sitting a short distance away, quietly observing her. The woman's calm demeanor gave Emma a sense of security she hadn't felt since she first entered the desert. Emma's body was still weak, but she felt stronger than she had the day before. The warm milk she had drunk and the rest she had taken had worked wonders. Her skin, still sun-kissed and damp with sweat, now felt more normal. Her limbs no longer trembled uncontrollably, and she could move without the same heavy weight that had made each step feel like lifting boulders. She looked at Ayanna and offered a small, grateful smile. The woman returned the gesture with a quiet nod, as if to say that their work was only beginning. Ayanna motioned for Emma to follow her to a nearby ridge, where the sun's rays were gentler and a faint breeze offered some relief from the heat. As Emma walked carefully behind her, she noticed the subtle ways Ayanna moved through the desert. Every step was deliberate, measured, and confident. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, taking in details that Emma had missed in her desperation: distant hills, the curve of a sand dune, small patches of shade that could provide shelter. It was as if the desert spoke to Ayanna and she knew exactly how to listen. Once they reached the ridge, Ayanna stopped and looked at Emma. "You need to understand this land," she said gently. "It can give life, but it can also take it. If you are to survive here, you must learn to see with more than your eyes. You must feel it, listen to it, respect it." Emma nodded, trying to absorb every word. She had thought that survival meant endurance, but Ayanna was showing her that survival was also about understanding, observation, and patience. Yana began to teach Emma simple yet vital skills. She showed her how to find signs of water in the desert. Sometimes it was in the most unexpected places: a small depression in the sand where moisture collected, a cluster of plants with roots that reached deep into the ground, or the tracks of animals that led to hidden sources. Emma listened intently, her mind absorbing every detail. Each lesson was a revelation, a secret of the desert that only someone who had lived there all their life could know. Next, Ayanna taught her about edible plants and fruits that could provide sustenance. Emma had never realized how much life could exist in such a harsh environment. Tiny, resilient shrubs, roots buried deep beneath the sand, and hidden fruits could sustain a traveler if one knew where and how to look. Yana patiently demonstrated how to identify safe plants, explaining the importance of testing small amounts first and always observing the environment carefully. Emma practiced, carefully digging and examining the small plants, marveling at how something so small could hold such life-giving potential. Yana also emphasized the importance of pacing oneself and conserving energy. She explained that moving during the hottest parts of the day could be fatal. Resting in the shade, finding cool areas, and even adjusting one's body posture to minimize heat exposure were critical skills. Emma realized that the desert was not only a test of physical endurance but also of intelligence, strategy, and mindfulness. Every movement had a purpose. Every decision could mean life or death. As they worked, Emma began to ask questions, genuinely curious about Ayanna's life. She learned that Ayanna had lived in the desert her entire life, having lost her family when she was young. Despite the hardships, she had developed a deep respect and understanding for the land. The desert, with all its dangers, had also taught her resilience, patience, and resourcefulness. She had learned to survive and thrive by listening to the land and observing its patterns. Emma listened in awe, realizing that Ayanna's wisdom was born from experience, struggle, and love for the environment she called home. Their conversation shifted to more personal topics as well. Emma shared snippets of her life before the desert: the city streets, the bustling markets, the simple joys of family and friends. Yana listened quietly, sometimes smiling faintly, sometimes offering quiet reflections. She spoke of loss, resilience, and the quiet strength required to continue when life seemed cruel. Through these exchanges, a bond began to form between them, one built on mutual respect, shared stories, and the understanding that human connection could flourish even in the harshest of environments. As the morning wore on, Emma felt her strength return more fully. She could walk steadily, her steps purposeful rather than desperate. She practiced moving through the sand under Ayanna's guidance, learning to balance herself, conserve energy, and remain aware of her surroundings. Each step became more confident, and with each lesson, Emma felt a growing sense of empowerment. She realized that the desert was no longer a place of terror, but a teacher, harsh and unforgiving, yet capable of offering lessons that would last a lifetime. During a brief rest, Ayanna showed Emma how to locate and collect small amounts of water from hidden sources. She demonstrated the use of simple tools and natural materials to filter and purify water. Emma listened carefully, amazed at the ingenuity required to survive. She realized that survival was not merely about endurance, but also about observation, problem-solving, and creativity. Every detail mattered, from the angle of a plant's leaves to the pattern of sand dunes shaped by the wind. Emma also began to learn about the importance of mental resilience. Yana emphasized that fear and despair could be as dangerous as thirst and heat. She encouraged Emma to remain calm, to focus on the next step rather than the entire journey, and to trust in her own abilities as well as the guidance she was receiving. Emma practiced breathing exercises, mindfulness, and small rituals that helped her stay centered and focused, even in the face of exhaustion. As the day progressed, Emma felt a deeper connection to the desert and to Ayana. The woman's presence was steady and reassuring, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, kindness and wisdom could make a profound difference. Emma realized that survival was not only about physical endurance, but also about relationships, trust, guidance, and mutual support. The lessons she learned from Ayana went beyond survival skills. They were lessons about life, resilience, and the human spirit. By the afternoon, Emma had regained most of her strength. She could move confidently across the sand, find shade, recognize signs of water, and identify edible plants. But more importantly, she had gained knowledge, patience, and a sense of respect for the desert. Each lesson from Ayana was a building block, shaping Emma into someone capable not just of surviving, but of thriving in this harsh environment. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dunes, Emma and Ayana sat together on a small ridge. The desert, once an endless expanse of fear and danger, now felt like a place of wonder and discovery. The sky transformed into brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the wind carried a gentle, cooling breeze. Emma felt a sense of peace she had never imagined possible in the desert. She looked at Ayana with gratitude, realizing that the woman had given her much more than milk and guidance. She had given her knowledge, confidence, and the ability to face challenges with a calm and focused mind. She had shown her that even in the most unforgiving places, human connection and wisdom could create hope and resilience. Emma felt a deep sense of admiration and respect for Ayana, understanding that some bonds were forged not by choice, but by circumstance and necessity. That night, as the desert grew quiet and the stars filled the sky, Emma reflected on all she had learned. She thought about her near collapse, the fear and exhaustion, and the miracle of Ayana's intervention. She realized that survival was more than physical endurance. It was about observation, knowledge, patience, and the willingness to trust others. The lessons of the day would stay with her forever, shaping not only her journey through the desert but her understanding of life itself. In the warmth of the desert night, with the gentle sounds of the wind and distant wildlife, Emma finally felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer just a traveler lost in the sand. She was a student of the desert, guided by Ayana's wisdom, learning not just how to survive, but how to live with respect, awareness, and resilience. The bond between them had grown stronger, built on trust, shared experience, and the quiet understanding that life, even in its harshest forms, could still offer hope and connection. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long, golden beams that stretched across the sand dunes. Emma awoke feeling stronger, lighter, and more aware than she had since the beginning of her journey. The events of the past days, the relentless struggle against the heat, the near collapse, and the miraculous intervention of Ayana, had left a deep impression on her. She could still feel the ache of her muscles, the dryness of her skin, and the thirst that had once seemed unbearable, but she also felt a renewed sense of energy, hope, and determination. Ayana had prepared a small meal of simple, nourishing food she had gathered from the desert. It was humble but sufficient: dried fruits, small roots, and a little water she had stored carefully. Emma ate slowly, savoring every bite, and allowed herself to truly notice the flavors, textures, and energy they provided. Each mouthful reminded her of how fragile and precious life could be. As she ate, she listened to Ayana speak of the desert with a quiet reverence. The desert, she explained, was not merely a place of hardship. It was a teacher, a mirror of human resilience, patience, and resourcefulness. Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned. She thought back to the moment she had first seen Ayanna from the ridge, on the brink of collapse, and how the woman's milk had revived her body and spirit. That single act of kindness had changed the course of her journey, saving her from what could have been a fatal encounter with the desert. But it had also taught her a lesson she would carry forever. Sometimes, survival depended not just on one's own strength, but on the generosity and wisdom of others. After breakfast, Ayanna helped Emma prepare for the journey ahead. She gave her advice on how to travel safely through the desert, what signs to watch for, and how to conserve energy while remaining alert. Emma paid close attention, understanding that each piece of guidance could mean the difference between life and death. Ayanna also reminded her that the desert could be both unforgiving and beautiful, and that appreciating its lessons required humility, observation, and respect. Emma nodded, absorbing every word, feeling a mixture of awe and responsibility. As they set off together for the last leg of Emma's journey out of the desert, the two women walked side by side. The sand beneath their feet was warm but stable, the wind gentler than it had been in the days before. Emma felt a profound connection to the land, to Ayanna, and to the experience that had nearly claimed her life. She realized that the desert had changed her, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. The struggle had forced her to confront her limits, her fears, and her dependence on others. It had also shown her that resilience, kindness, and knowledge were more powerful than sheer determination alone. During their walk, Emma and Ayanna talked about life beyond the desert. Emma shared her plans, dreams, and aspirations, and Ayanna listened attentively, offering quiet advice and reflections. She spoke of the importance of patience, self-awareness, and humility in all aspects of life, not just survival. She reminded Emma that true strength came not from pushing oneself recklessly, but from understanding one's limits and respecting the environment, people, and circumstances around them. Emma found herself reflecting deeply on these words, realizing how much they applied not just to surviving the desert, but to navigating the challenges of everyday life. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a ridge that overlooked the edge of the desert. From this vantage point, Emma could see the first signs of life beyond the endless sand, green patches of shrubs, distant trees, and the faint outline of a small village in the distance. Her heart swelled with relief and accomplishment. She had survived. She had learned. She had grown, and she had been guided by the kindness and wisdom of someone who knew the desert intimately. Emma turned to Ayanna, feeling a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and sadness. She knew that their paths would likely diverge here. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion rising in her chest. "I don't know if I could have made it without you. You saved my life and you taught me more than I ever imagined." Ayanna smiled faintly, a gentle and knowing expression that seemed to encompass both pride and reassurance. "You have your own strength," Ayanna replied softly. "I only showed you the way. The courage to take each step, to keep going even when it seemed impossible, that was always inside you. Remember that." Emma nodded, understanding the profound truth in those words. She had relied on Ayanna's guidance, but her survival had ultimately depended on her own resilience, determination, and willingness to learn. Before parting, Ayanna gave Emma a small container of water and a simple cloth to protect herself from the sun. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Respect the desert, and it will respect you in return. And remember, life is a journey that tests you in ways you cannot always predict." Emma accepted the gifts with gratitude, feeling the weight of their significance. They were more than practical items. They were symbols of wisdom, care, and human connection that she would carry with her always. As Emma began her descent from the ridge toward the greener lands beyond, She felt a sense of transformation within herself. The desert had been a place of danger, fear, and near defeat, but it had also been a place of discovery, growth, and profound lessons. She felt stronger, more aware, and more capable than ever before. The memory of Ayana's milk, her patient guidance, and the quiet strength she exuded would remain with Emma forever, shaping her perspective on life, survival, and the importance of helping others in need. The journey out of the desert was still challenging, but Emma moved with confidence and awareness. She noticed subtle signs in the sand, followed animal tracks to find sources of water, and took care to rest in shaded areas when necessary. Each step was a reminder of what she had learned: the balance between caution and determination, the power of observation, and the importance of respecting the environment. She felt connected not just to the land, but to the lessons it had taught her, and to the person she had become through this experience. As she approached the edge of the desert, where shrubs became more frequent and the soil less harsh, Emma reflected on how much she had changed. The fear that had once gripped her, the desperation that had threatened to overwhelm her, had been replaced by clarity, strength, and a deep sense of gratitude. She understood that survival was not merely about physical endurance, but about awareness, patience, knowledge, and the guidance of those who cared enough to help. When she finally reached the outskirts of the village, the familiar signs of life, trees, water sources, and distant voices, filled her with relief and joy. But alongside that relief was a profound sense of respect for the desert and for Ayana, who had guided her through it. Emma knew that the experience had changed her in ways that would last a lifetime. She had faced death, embraced life, and discovered the strength within herself to survive. Emma paused at the edge of the village, looking back toward the desert. The dunes stretched endlessly behind her, glowing golden in the afternoon sun. She remembered the heat, the thirst, the near collapse, and the miraculous intervention that had saved her. She thought of Ayana's steady presence, her wisdom, and the lessons she had shared. Emma felt a mixture of awe, gratitude, and humility. The desert had tested her, but it had also gifted her with knowledge, resilience, and a connection that transcended circumstance. As she entered the village, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her journey through the desert had been more than a physical challenge. It had been a journey of personal growth, discovery, and transformation. She carried with her not only the practical skills to survive harsh conditions, but also a deeper understanding of the human spirit, kindness, and the importance of helping others. Every step she took beyond the desert was a reminder of the life she had almost lost, the life she had been given, and the lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. In the days that followed, Emma shared her story with friends and family, recounting the harshness of the desert, her near-death experience, and the extraordinary kindness of Ayana. But beyond the tale of survival, she shared the lessons she had learned, the importance of observation, patience, resilience, and trust. She spoke of the generosity of a stranger, the quiet strength of a woman who had lived in the desert her entire life, and the ways in which human connection could save lives, even in the harshest conditions. Emma never forgot Ayana. The memory of her calm, steady presence, the warmth of her milk, and the wisdom she shared remained with Emma forever. The desert had been a place of fear and danger, but it had also been a place of revelation, transformation, and profound human kindness. Emma understood now that life often presented challenges that seemed insurmountable, but that guidance, generosity, and courage could turn despair into hope, weakness into strength, and vulnerability into resilience. Years later, Emma would think back to that journey whenever life felt difficult. She would remember the burning heat, the near collapse, and the miraculous encounter with Ayana. She would remember the lessons of the desert, the patience, the observation, the respect, and the courage. And she would remember the milk, warm and life-giving, and the quiet presence of a woman who had changed her life forever. In every challenge she faced after that, Emma carried the desert with her, not just as a memory of struggle, but as a source of wisdom, gratitude, and unshakable strength.